Hello and welcome to this video, and on this video I'm going to be going through 10 albums that should be on the greatest albums ever made list but never are. Some of them might make it, but they won't make it to the top. You know why? Because the critics that do these things are too busy putting up albums like this. Pet Sounds. It's okay, right? It's all right. Listen to it a lot. Some nice stuff on there. Is this the, according to Rolling Stone, this is the second greatest album ever made. What a load of rubbish. The greatest album ever made, according to Rolling Stone, is that one. What's going on? I like this album. It's a good soul album, good funky soul album. Is it the greatest funky soul album ever made? Well, no. There's a whole bunch of albums that I think are better. And what about this one, representing punk? You know, an okay album. I don't hate it. It's never excited me. And then we get things like this. You know, artists that have to be there because they're so great, but then they pick the wrong album just because it's the famous one or the one that sold a lot of records, but it's not necessarily best. Anybody knows that Sign of the Times is the best, you know, but I'd be putting in a word for Love Sexy. So, you know, this is part 3 of my long, in-depth exploration into the 20 greatest albums ever made. I'm going to come up with a list at the end of this, and it's going to be negotiated. We're going to go through a whole lot. Now, what I want you to do on this video is help me a little bit, because what I'm going to do is I've just pulled out of my record collection 10 albums that I think should be on the list of the greatest albums ever made by anybody ever, right? But it's a very sort of, rather than having a very intellectual approach, I've literally walked in and gone, well, that's got to be on there, and that's got to be on there. And the first 10 I thought of are the ones that I have with me here. Now, not only are these the first, these are great albums, and I love these albums. And I also think each of these albums, if you play it to someone who doesn't like the genre it comes from, they're still going to begrudgingly say, yeah, it is a really great album. It's not my thing, but it is really great. And I think that's really important. And that was something that I established on part 2. Here I'm going to be going through those 10 albums, and I'm going to be ranking them, I think, which I forgot to do. You see, I'm really trying to do this in front of your very eyes, right? So, which do I think is the greatest out of all these albums? If I do a quick thing, when it's probably that one. And then I would probably say it's followed up by that one. And then I might have to go, me personally, for that one. Then yeah, it's probably that one, then that one. I'm doing it in front of your eyes. Might not quite got it right, but I did want to. Oh, that's an amazing. Now let's put that one there. Yeah, those two. Oh, that's going to be number 10. Let's go with that, and then we'll have that one at number. Yeah, so I've just ranked them as well, but I've done this in a very visceral way. You know, I've just gone on my intuition, my hunches. But when I read those lists, there's certain albums, and I go, wonder why they haven't got that album. Well, you know why? Because the critics don't like that album, or they always think it's too overindulgent. It's the sort of music you like, and you're taking in your own biases. Well, I've done that. I've got the 10 here. Your job is to agree. I don't want to, well, you can put what you think in the list, because this is what you need to start to do. I really am going to take my time doing this. So if it's something that you think also should be on that top 20 list, and if you really think that anything I'm about to offer here shouldn't be, then you've got to say, and it will become part of the material I use going forth this week to arrive at this list at the end. What I want to do is basically be iconoclastic. I want to shove all this rubbish off so that it doesn't get, you know, and I also want to bypass that sort of po-faced intellectual, I'm a music critic and I know what's good, and you know, I really love the, you know, Joy Division actually took post-punk and, you know, brought in a bleak sort of northern British. You know, I don't want any of that. I want albums that people actually listen to. Now, there's certain albums I've been listening to for about, well, in this case, for 43 years, and I've just put it on number 10 on my list, and it's this one. Right? I love the Paul Di'Anno era of Iron Maiden. That's the stuff I love. That's what I grew up with. When Bruce Dickinson joined, it turned into something else. But I have to say, the they're primed and ready. The new wave of British heavy metal has brought in all these disparate elements. There's a punk aspect to it. There's a prog aspect to it. There's a classic rock aspect to it. And there's also this bizarre sort of heavy metal virtuosity that is emerging. And Iron Maiden are exploring that in depth. And with Bruce Dickinson, they just explode in some of the most sophisticated metal. And on this, they explore, the revelations of the Bible. We've got Vikings. They talk about prostitution, Native Americans, gangsters, the Second World War. All these things are covered on this album, which I still listen to from this day. And this album, for me, it's like heavy metal was one thing. When I got into heavy metal in 1979, 1980, it was because of the new wave of British heavy metal. But we called AC/DC heavy metal back then. We called, you bought Kerrang and they'd have Pat Benatar and people like that in. When Iron Maiden nailed it with this album and it went like worldwide massive hits, I bought this the day it came out. The expectations were so high. And when they did that renegotiates what heavy metal is. This could be argued is the beginning of heavy metal, what we have on this album here. Now, every now and then I pull this one out to see what it sounds like. And that's why I now own it on CD. I no longer have my vinyl copy. I've now got a nice plush, special multimedia edition on CD. And every now and then I'll stick it in the car. And the first track comes in, Invaders, and it just blows my socks off. And then Children of the Damned blows my socks off. This is a very important album. It's an innovative album. It's by a band that the critics now grudgingly liked, but would have just brushed away as just being a bunch of tight-trousered, hairy rockers and not sophisticated enough for them to consider. Now, after 40-odd years, probably 50 years in Iron Maiden's case, and they are still there. They're still making a ton of money. They're still doing huge tours because this is important. This is innovative. This has influenced so many more bands than bloody Joy Division or The Cure or The Smiths ever did, right? This has to be on the list, surely. Iron Maiden, Rolling Stone haven't put it on. Surely this one has to be on the list. Maybe Peace of Mind, I don't know. Maybe Killers before, I don't know. I think it's this one though. It's so enjoyable, right? The songwriting is so strong. The musicality of it is just nailed. The band sound incredible. Nico McBrain did a brilliant job, and I think it was an incredible drummer, but there was something magical about the Clive Burr band, as we all say, and it's unique, it's unique. This album is unique. This has to be on the list. Surely we have that on our list. What do you think? This is what this one's about, so I have that on number 10. So the ones I've got on here coming up, well, I think they all need to be on. At number 9, I've pulled this one out. If there was one album that defines my YouTube channel, right? It's this album. It is heavy metal, heavy rock, progressive rock, jazz rock, prog, and even a touch of Indian classical music and a touch of Americana and folk on here. And this album, right, is a miracle. Something's going on with jazz rock fusion in the 1960s and 70s. Miles Davis explored it, got Weather Report. Jazz musicians are crossing over, a generation that have been listening to jazz. They're highly skilled and highly musical, but they've also been listening to rock and Hendrix and stuff like that. Hendrix still opens the door, doesn't he, to this thing? But who would have thought this would come through? An instrumental album from a band that was so loud that the first engineer recording this album walked out of the studio. What was captured on here was mind-blowing. And this progressive rock experiment that was pushing the album forward, all these bands like Yes and Genesis and ELP, and King Crimson, right, they're all doing their thing. But when this comes along, they all have to bow down and go, well, look, that's it. It sets a standard. It sets a standard in musical virtuosity. It sets a standard in extreme music, in speed, in aggressiveness, in violence. It also sets a standard in terms of spiritual music. This band becomes the go-to band. In the 1970s, you're going to drop acid and go and have a spiritual experience. That's what you're going to do. This transformed people. Now, of course, the critics just brush this aside. Right, even me myself, there's certain Mahavishnu Orchestra albums with me being such an aficionado that I like more than this one. But this is the one. People have said that to me in the early days of this channel. I said, Andy, now it's In a Mountain Flame, and I've realised they're right. This is the album. This literally is the spark that sets fire to it all, isn't it? That's what I've got number 9 on my list. The In Your Face. Rip your face off. I think Schofield said that his punk was in 1916 and at 280 BPM, and he's talking about this. This is my punk as well. This is my punk. That album is my punk. Dance of Maya is still the heaviest track ever made. What have I got number 8 on my list of albums that aren't on these lists but should be? Well, I sit there looking at my huge Frank Zappa collection. I've probably got about 50 or 60 albums by Frank Zappa. There's 100 in total. The critics grudgingly like the Mothers of Invention. They see them as countercultural and anarchistic. Is that the right word? Anarchistic. And they also realise the incredible innovations that are going on with Frank Zappa. The influence on the Beatles, the influence on jazz rock fusion, the influence on prog. Freak Out would be the one, but anyone who knows Freak Out knows that's not really a Frank Zappa album, is it? It is a Frank Zappa album, but it's not what he was about to do. And then I started to think about the Iron Maiden albums and the albums that blow people away, and the album that even non-Zappa fans grudgingly have to like. And this album, I believe, does everything that Frank Zappa does. It's an incredible representation of him. And no, it's not one size fits all. I think that this album should be on the list of the greatest albums ever made. Here, Frank Zappa has got a multi-track use. I think he's got 12 channels here. No one's ever had 12 channels. And there's never been in rock musicians who knew how to use 12 channels. Frank Zappa knew how to use 12 channels. And he forges something here that takes the innovations that Brian Wilson did on Pet Sounds and kicks them right up the bum off the face of the earth. You want to hear what a virtuoso musician can do in terms of arrangement in a multi-track studio using weird sounds. The thing that Pet Sounds always gets the credit for. Go and listen to this. Now, this is 1969. It's a few years later. But I would argue with Uncle Me on We're Only in It Funny. For the Money, Zappa had done all this consistently, one album after the other. Here, this is so beautiful, isn't it? It also has got wigged out guitar jams. It's also got electric violin, and it seems to be a precursor in a way to what the Mahavishnu Orchestra are going to do the following year. And we also do have a vocal on the. I think the critics like this one. I'll show you inside it. The critics like this one because there's not much singing on it, so they don't have to deal with Frank Zappa's politically incorrect worldview. But there is one song on here, and it's sung by Captain Beefheart. Now, I think there's an argument that Captain Beefheart album should be on this list as well, but I haven't gone and got one. But I tell you, it shouldn't be Trackmaster Replica. That's not his best album. That's another question. Which Beefheart album are we going to put? I think he needs to go on. I want to put Trackmaster Replica, but I know I'm going for this cultural thing. I'm not listening to the album. Right, what Beefheart does, he does brilliantly on Hot Rods on that moment when he comes on with Frank. Frank understands him, and his voice just rocks. His voice is vicious. It's got the blues in it. It's also got avant-garde jazz in it. He does what he does there vocally. In terms of Beefheart's musical view of the world, I don't know. Lick My Decals Off, which one would it be? Spotlight Kid? I don't know. I feel that Zappa had a detrimental influence on Trackmaster Replica. And I think once Beefheart was able to get close to it himself on the next few albums that came up, I think that's where he just made a statement no one else has made. And I think Trackmaster Replica has stopped people from going listen to those albums and being blown away by it, because Trackmaster Replica has a bit of Zappa and Beefheart, a little bit like my Wildman Fisher's, like a Barnum in the Freak Show, and he wants to show that off. I don't think he was totally committed to what musically Beefheart was trying to do. Beefheart was all instinct, Zappa was all knowing, and that was why they were oil and water, and it could work out sometimes, and other times it couldn't. This is why Bongo Fury, their big collaboration in 1975, is not ever mentioned in the great Zappa albums. It's a good album, but it's better than what people think. Anyway, if we look at the album years, I was talking about this yesterday, the album years are really 65 to 75. And then we get blips right up until around about 1999, 2000. But there's this glorious period, it's like a renaissance in the album, where the album is the art form in itself. And the idea of the concept album and what you could do with an album reaches a peak around about 72, 73. I've been in this business for a while now, doing top 10 prog albums, top 10 epics, top 10 this and top 10 that. And there is one album that no one ever complains about if I make it number one in the world of progressive rock. And even the critics that criticize progressive rock, even though this is an absolute display of virtuosity, of compositional brilliance, the critics grudgingly like this album too. It is, of course, this album. Now, I know this is never going to be anywhere near the top 10 or top 20 of any critic courts going on about the greatest albums ever made. But this is one of the greatest albums ever made on every single level, right? On a technical level, on an innovation level, in the idea of what the album can do, and on a conceptual level, and even a political level. Yes, are trying to do something with the music here. And yes, it's intellectual and highfalutin. And yes, the critics like to champion a bunch of like working class guys with three chords, because they believe that's authentic. Some of they don't believe that this is authentic, but it is. It is. And John Anderson was a working class guy that had come up through that 60s music scene, but he wanted to make a rock version of Sibelius, not the software. I'm on about the composer. So yes, this one should be on the list, I believe. And I now have said that, I feel like that one's too low. And I feel like Number of the Beast is too low. I've just dragged an album by this band. I know they're never going to figure on this list. Right, these critics, they love visceral rock and roll, but they don't love actual real visceral rock and roll. They don't like that. They like the whiff of the Clash. They like Joe Strummer, the sort of middle class, privately educated boy singing about revolution, right? What they don't want with their working class heroes is them singing about anything actually working class, like having sex with fat girls, right? They don't like that, do they? And one band has been able to turn that into an art form. It's one of the greatest bands in rock history, perhaps the greatest rock band of all time. Of course, it's AC/DC. What album? I've grabbed my favourite one, Highway to Hell. It could be Back in Black. It could be Power Age. It could be If You Want Blood. I don't know which one. Let's go through them. Power Age is the greatest of the early Vander Brothers produced AC/DC albums. Their first two Australian releases, High Voltage and TNT, are patchy, but they have some great moments on. When they are combined into the album High Voltage, it's actually a classic album, almost sublime High Voltages in terms of how great the compilation American version is. And that's where AC/DC start for me. They then get the full Atlantic Records treatment, Hypnosis cover, and you get Dirty Deeds done dirt cheap. I think that's one of the weakest albums of that period. It's got some great tracks on it, but the great tracks also appear on other albums. They falter. It's like it suffers almost from second album syndrome, even though it's sort of third album. Then they go in and do Let There Be Rock, and Let There Be Rock could be on this list. That's another one that could be on this list. It's mind-blowing. Then they go even one step further with Power Age, and Power Age is like the peak of that period. And all that is summed up on the album If You Want Blood, which is one of the greatest live albums ever made. And I think if you wanted to represent AC/DC on this list, Maybe If You Want Blood is the album because it brings together all those classic tracks, you know. And the version of Whole Lotta Rosie is the version that you listen to, not the one on Let There Be Rock. Then they go to America and they then cross over and they have Robert Mutt Lange producing them, that gives them this rock and roll sheen that we're then going to hear pushed to the extreme on all those Def Leppard albums, you know, ending up with that woman he married. Who was that? You know, that don't impress me much. What's her name? You know, her album has sold masses. You know, when we go through the biggest albums of all time, which I will be doing on this series, she'll be in there. And I can't even remember her name. She's a great singer. She sold something like 50, 60 million albums, and that one album with that track on, that don't impress me much. You know, that one. What's her name? I want to say Celine Dion. She's another one. But Robert Mutt Lange didn't marry that Celine Dion. He married it. What's her name? God, Jan, you're getting old. Anyway, that sort of production approach is on this. And it's like this one, it stands alone because you've got the backing vocals, the real sort of poppy choruses. I love it. I absolutely love it. But it's also dirty. Highway to Hell, brilliant. Girls Got Rhythm, brilliant. Walk All Over You, brilliant. Touch Too Much, brilliant. Beating Around the Bush, brilliant. Shot Down in Flames, brilliant. Get It Hot. I would send a video trying to find a fault with this album. I said, well, Get It Hot's not quite as good. Then I went and listened to it. I thought, you know, it is. It just lacks a chorus, that's all. If You Want Blood, amazing. Love Hungry Man, amazing. Night Prowler, terrifying, amazing. Should be near the top, shouldn't it? Right? Should be near the top. This year was a momentous year for music. We saw Black Sabbath, you know, have their final salute to us as we saluted them back. Ozzy Osbourne on stage in his throne, you know, because he couldn't stand up. And then a few weeks later, he passed away. Heavy metal, which has been the music that has been the music of my life, that was the beginning, and then it seems to be the end as well. All-encompassing, you know, that brings us Iron Maiden, and the critics don't know how to deal with it. Sabbath, which that Sabbath album could be the first album. I've gone with this one. I think that's the one I would put. That, and there needs to be a Sabbath album on this. It could be Sabotage as well. I would put that one, or maybe Masters of Reality. They're all incredible. Brilliant bands do more than one good album, right? That's why Pet Sounds is a bit of an anomaly. Sabbath, they just kept hitting home runs all the time. I think I'd go with this one. Paranoid needs to be on our list. Do you think I'm right or not? We're getting down to the last four now. Right. These two are rock albums. And to me, these albums are pretty much perfect. Incredible. They sold millions and millions. And they're both albums that can change people when they listen to them. I've got them up together. I'll go with this one first. There's many Led Zeppelin albums we could go for. Many people would be going for Physical Graffiti, which I'm not such a fan of. I love the album, but this one's perfect to me. It's got Stairway to Heaven on, and people just want to be obtuse because it's got Stairway to Heaven on. But I remember the effect that had on me when I was a kid, you know, and it has an effect on kids. You know, when my kids got to, I was like, what's the greatest song ever made, Dad? It's Stairway to Heaven, but you're going to have to listen to it all the way through. We'll do that. And they listen to it by the end. Oh, my God, what was that? It was incredible. It's a mind-blowing album. This is incredible, isn't it? Absolutely incredible. Surely that needs to be in the top 20. Why wasn't it in Rolling Stone's top 20? We're talking about Led Zeppelin, biggest band of all bloody time. What's going on? And this monster, right? You might hate Pink Floyd. You might love Pink Floyd. You might, you know, hate prog. You might love prog. But the amount of times someone sat down with this album and it blows you away. It blows you away. And it blows you away with stuff that is just so strange and bizarre. I can remember getting in a car, taking kids to school, got a bunch of girls in the car that are like you know, 12, 13 years old. And on the radio comes Great Gig in the Sky, which is an instrumental tune with a woman just wailing over the top. They know it. They loved it. They asked me to turn it up. They were trying to sing along to it. And I thought, my God, what is the power of this album? When I was a kid, it was money. That just represented everything about capitalism to me. And as soon as I hear it, I can see in my mind, you know, roulette wheels going round and, you know, and those numbers on where they buy all the shares. You know, it's an incredible album. Absolutely incredible album. When I bought this, I can remember putting it on my dad's stereo, and it just eases you in, doesn't it? And you feel that, you know, I was like 14 years old. There I am in the mind of a middle-aged man, which Roger Waters wasn't at the time either. But he's like a man looking at a midlife crisis. And then suddenly all those alarm clocks go off, and then we get that boop, 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 and all these sounds, and they sounded all around me. And I can't tell you, buy that album. And I've had a go at Pink Floyd, you know, and the reason I have a go at them is because I think this is the album that lets them off everything else. There's a whole massive fan base for The Wall, which I think is a bit boring. Wish You Were Here is the beginning of dad rock. It is sublime and great, you know, but it is a little bit snores-worthy. Animals is what the proggers like, you know. There's a lot of experimentation in the early days, and on, I think, the Sidelong Atom Heart Mother, that's a really out there record for a mainstream rock band. And Echoes is absolutely incredible. I feel that their high point in terms of Pink Floyd was Pink Floyd at Pompeii. This stands alone. It stands alone. It's so iconic. There's a part of me, even though I'm not the biggest Pink Floyd fan, as you know, but I do love them. But there's a part of me that thinks this should maybe be number one. You know, the Rolling Stone, they've got this at number one. Just have a think about it. This is a great album. That's a great album. What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. But this, think about it. We accept this at number one. Oh, there's a good album. Yeah, I like that album. No, it should be. Surely this is our number one. Is Dark Side of the Moon our number one? If I make that my number one, is that the cornerstone that we work from? Have I made my statement with this by making this, having a prog album at number one? I haven't really thought what should go to number one. I'm trying to show you the thought process here in front of you on this video. That's what we're doing. And then the jazz in me, you know, you know what I'm like. I think jazz is on a level above all other music. I always have done. And I think this album I've got at number two. Maybe it shouldn't be at number two. For me, it's one of the greatest albums ever made. And again, it gives you an experience like Dark Side of the Moon does, but this is a spiritual experience. I was brought up in an atheistic family, scientist, rational, right? I never went to church, you know, I've never been a Christian or anything, Muslim, never been anything. My spirituality came through music, came first with the Mavish Nocturne and then John Coltrane. And if I ever had a spiritual experience when I was young, it wasn't going to church or reading the Bible. It was listening to this and reading the words on the back that Coltrane had written. I mean, just looking at it now, it just holds such an incredible place for me, this album does. It is one of the greatest albums ever made. But I've got it at number two. What have I got at number one? Kind of Blue, Miles Davis. This, again, is not my favourite Miles Davis album. It's not even my favourite jazz album from this quintet. It's not even that. This album occupies its own space. It's the biggest selling jazz album of all time. And why? I'll tell you why I think it is. On this 1959 is a concept album. It's called Kind of Blue. And Miles Davis is pursuing something that was very popular in the 1950s, which is sort of a nighttime album. An album when you've been out and you come home and you want to relax and you put an album out. And so the blue it refers to is as much as the blues as it is nighttime. This is a dark album. When we look at it, you know, Blue in Green, All Blues, Flamenco Sketches, there's a sense of the blues in here. But what Miles is doing is he's slowing the blues down, and we have the inclusion of Bill Evans on this album. And Bill Evans brings something to this that is not any other Miles Davis album. And it's this sort of very European, classical, impressionistic approach to the music. This is a Bill Evans album more than it is a Miles Davis album in reality. What Miles does is his vision for doing something that no one else has done before is pushing him towards modality. And modality is the way that Indian classical music is created, where rather than building your tune up from a chord progression, it's built from a scale. Everyone's pulling from that scale. And that scale has a root, but then you can play whatever chords you want in that scale, and it frees people up. They don't have to run the gauntlet of jumping through the chord changes. So what famously is in two Dorian modes, I think it's D Dorian, and then it moves up a semitone to E flat Dorian. Now, that's all very clever stuff, and it changes jazz. I Love Supreme, which comes in afterwards, we can see as being modal scalar jazz, not bebop, 251 derived jazz. This is all very technical stuff, and you might be saying, yeah, Andy, you can't use this as a criteria for getting an album number one. But the thing is when jazz went modal and it started to just use scales rather than chords, and rock musicians started to pick up electric guitars and explore the blues in a wider realm, exactly like Miles is doing here, the modality allows rock musicians to express themselves in an improvisational way without having to learn to play jazz and play through the changes. And bands like the Grateful Dead and all those, like Hendrix, Machine Gun and all that stuff, the Led Zeppelins, with their long sort of jam on Days to Confuse, or Space Trucking by Deep Purple, and in a very sophisticated way that rock musicians would extend rock music through improvisation that was veering on the psychedelic. 59, it starts here, right? But also we see that in soul and funk has come out of gospel music, it's hymn music. Again, it's based upon the cadence of a 1/4/5, it's that type of music. But when we get James Brown turning up to a studio in 1967, and because these musicians are jazz musicians, they're jamming on So What. And he hears it, he hears that modality, he hears the fact that there is no chord changes, right? And of So What has turned into this Cold Sweat. Cold Sweat is So What, a funkified version of it. James Brown then notices it, and then he starts to sing, and he doesn't stick to verse choruses anymore. His grunts and shouts become the song in itself. That opens up the door to everything, to hip hop, to electronica, to all sorts of things. Everything is embodied in James Brown's track Cold Sweat, which again is coming out of this album. This album changes the face of rock music, soul, and classical music. There would be no minimalism, there would be no funk, and there would be no psychedelic rock without this album. So this album is a pretty heavyweight album in terms of influence. So these sorts of criteria, these are the discussions we have to have. So where have we arrived at here at the end of part 3 of my exploration? Well, I think I've put forth 10 albums that I think need to be on my list. Which albums on the Rolling Stone list are we going to keep? I've got a few around me. I mean, if I pull these up, I think there's a good argument that these need to be on. I'll just grab them. Sorry about this. You know how my videos are. So if we take the Rolling Stone list, I think that should be on, without a doubt. I'll stick that there on the pile. I think that could possibly be the Beatles album I put forth, or it could be that one. What have you got here? Incredible innovation, right? A band showing you how to use the recording studio, even more than Sgt. Pepper. This just musical perfection, a band who knows how to create an incredible album. Which one? Maybe we have both of them on, I don't know. I'll stick them both in the mix. This one, without a doubt, that would be the one for me. Although I think Innovisions might be the one I'd go for. I'll keep that list there till tomorrow. I think I'm starting to go through the list. I think the next thing I need to look at is popularity. There's a reason why albums are popular. So tomorrow I'm going to be going through the 20 biggest selling albums of all time and a few that are sloshing around the bottom and seeing if any of those should be on the list. And once we've got those in, I think we'll need to talk about innovation and look at certain albums that seem to set the tone for music in the future. Once we've got all those, we'll probably have about 30. Then we got the whittle ones out, and we should be able to come up with a 20, which I think are okay. But your job now is to tell me whether these sort of albums, this video is basically me going, these are the albums that the critics are never going to pick because they're too snotty. They're not going to pick an AC/DC album. But everybody loves AC/DC. Everybody does, right? You know, that's the bottom line. On my politics channel yesterday, I had a chat with a mate of mine who's a musician and a PhD physicist about Israel and the war. And then we got talking about music at the end, and he loves all the weird music I love. And what album were we talking about? If You Want Blood by AC/DC. Oh, I love that album. Our band always listens to that album. Of course you do. The real people know what the great albums are. The real people know. Right? I want to get to that list. I want to come up with 20 albums that you can go out and buy and not get fooled into buying things like this that you feel like you have to. Right? We all own them, don't we? We never listen to it. Bloody Astral Weeks. That's why I knock Astral Weeks. Astral Weeks is a poor album. Right? It's a poor album. There are Van Morrison albums I quite like. Right? He's not that bad, really. You know, I keep hearing things I like by him now. And also getting to know him, that grumpy exterior that I saw firsthand, I'm starting to see might be the cover-up for somebody who is actually quite funny in a really grumpy way. But Astral Weeks, you know, if I put that on the list, everyone would just go, yeah, of course you're going to have Astral Weeks, of course you're going to have Pet Sounds. You know, what about, which album do you think by the Smiths do you think is the best one? You know, maybe you need to have something by the Ramones. I mean, that debut Ramones album really does, you know, stake a claim for visceral rock and roll in the mid-70s. It really cleaned it up. All that horrible progressive rock by all those good musicians who could play. I mean, it got rid of all that, didn't it? It got rid of it all, didn't it? Those types get on my nerves. I'm surrounded by them. And I tell you something that's going on. If you actually want to look, here we are, 2025, right? We have gone through roughly 60 years, not quite, since the beginning of the album. And the beginning of the album in 65 coincides with a certain cultural movement that happens where that generation wanted to have a revolution. They wanted to create a utopia. And they didn't want to go about it like, you know, revolutionary Marxists. They wanted to do it peacefully. They wanted it to be about love. And they all went to Woodstock. And they went, look at Woodstock. We could live like this. We could be in a field the whole time, you know, just hanging out, dancing with sheep and, you know, taking acid and to Jimi Hendrix. Could be, and of course it couldn't be. And it didn't last. And it came crashing down. It went through a whole bunch of process. But those ideas were very important because they emancipated people. Black people, gay people, trans people were emancipated. The civil rights movement got into action. And the sort of tolerant world that we've lived in for the last 50 years has been a wonderful time to live, hasn't it? And the peak of it was somewhere around the 1990s where the balance was all correct. But then the balance started to unend. And then what happened was certain people thought, well, we need to do even more. We need more identity politics. We need to really root out racism. I know we've rooted out proper racism, but now we've got to, there's this thing called systemic racism, of course, according to these scientists. You know, there's a white supremacy, according to these scientists. And what about queer theory? Maybe with this, all the gays, they didn't quite get it right. So there's been a movement. And what we see now in the world, and chatting to my friend in Israel, this almost is embodied in that war that's going on. I have to touch on the political element here because I'm trying to make an important statement here. I feel that what we see right at the moment is the death. It is the death of that era, the rock and roll era. The album era is dead. It has gone a long time ago. The values that were positive have gone a long time ago. And there's bunch of people, and neither of them are right, but they're at each other now, right? And here I am as a YouTuber putting the thing to bed. That's what I'm doing, you know. There we go. Now's the time to put this to bed. Here I am, 57 years old. I'll come up with the list. The Rolling Stone list wasn't good enough because it's not true. Oh, I'll tell you what we all liked. We all liked AC/DC, the Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. They forget all that. Oh, great, brilliant. So we know what we all like. Shall we all lie down now and wait for death? And once our generation is gone, we'll pass it on to all these people and they will have to negotiate a new way of seeing things and a new way of doing things, right? This culture's coming to an end right now. The album meant something to our generation. You know, it meant something like people who read, you know, On the Road by, he was that by Kerouac or Allen Ginsberg, Howell. You know, all those books that a certain generation read, they had them in their pocket. You know, well, I didn't have that in my pocket. I had Highway to Hell. That's what it is. That's what we're celebrating here. The political has to be considered in this, I think. It has to be considered. And that's something else I might need to do. And I think the reason why a lot of the albums I pulled out here, it's either the politics aren't in vogue anymore. Frank Zappa's incredibly political, but he doesn't chime with our times, does he? He's too at odds, he's too anarchic. He won't sign up to the ideology of identity. He doesn't sign up to that. He's too individualistic. Right, he's anarchic and countercultural, but he's individualistic, like the right-winger individualistic, and the critics and the people who control this, they don't like that. AC/DC, are they political? No. They're not political. Sex Pistols were political. So there's a lot to consider. I don't want to throw any of these out. I don't want to not have those albums that represent that. When I hold up Dark Side of the Moon and say, this is a greater album than what's going on, you could say, yeah, but look at what the black community were expressing there. They'd gone from Motown to a serious thing where they were talking about the problems in the world at that time. But for me, Dark Side of the Moon does that, but does it in a way that goes beyond just the political, into an almost like existential view of the way the world is. And Roger Waters, who basically has a left-wing view of the world, is able to present that in a way on Dark Side of the Moon that goes beyond that. He's not pulled down by that because he's pulled in by the other musicians at that point. And that's the other thing about rock bands and albums. They were always a statement of individuality, but also the produce of a community who had a worldview. And the great artists, the ones that I love, whether it's Frank Zappa or Miles Davis or whoever it is, they didn't just create music, they created their own little world in which the music could exist. And that also has to be represented as well. I am going to keep going this week down this road towards this platonic album list that I want to create, which I know I can't. On the way, there will be lists, there will be top tens, there will be all sorts of things. You will get your fix of top tens on every single one, except for part 2, where I didn't do it, but I've done it here. You got to see the 10 albums that should be on the list that aren't. I hope you enjoyed it. Tomorrow, we're going to look at the biggest selling albums, and I might look at the most innovative albums. And then I might look at the culture and political. And I think once I've done that, we'll have a list of albums. I might keep extending this criteria as well. And then once we get to the end of it, you know what I need to get out to establish this top 20, once I've got about 40 albums on my list. I need to get the old superiometer out, don't we? It needs to be the last. You know, the superiometer's too dangerous to use. I was using it last night on a few albums, and I felt, oh, you're playing with fire here, and I put it away. But I might have to do that for you. Once we got the definites on, we're going to have the maybes. If I put definitely maybe on, which I'm not going to, but if I was, that would make it even more confusing. But once I've got the maybes, those ones, we need to get them to fight out in some sort of gladiatorial conflict using the superiometer. And I might need to do that in some way so we can have them fight out. I might have to get some people involved as well. I'm working this out for you in front of your very eyes. Let's see if we can nail this. Anyway, I feel like I've said enough now. If you like this video, like it. If you want to see some more, subscribe. You can become a patron, free member or paid up member, or you'll put some money in your PayPal tip jar. If you need to reward me financially, which I think you should, because I'm trying ever so hard here, and I'm tired and I've been doing a lot of talking. My voice is all croaky. I need to buy some sweets to put in my mouth because I've got a croaky voice. Or you can become a member here and watch all the stuff that's for the members, right? So, and get to see all these videos up front and whatever. I don't know. I don't know how the membership works, to be honest. I don't know what they get to see, but that's the. I found out the other day there's a community there, and I didn't know it was there. They're all chatting and putting messages on it. I feel like I've been ignoring them. I didn't even know it was there. Didn't know it was there. Got a lot of big play. A very busy man. See you all. Bye.